A few months back, a friend of mine suggested I watch the first episode of the obnoxiously long 20 questions asked titled Shumatsu nani shitemasu ka, isugashi desu ka, tsukute muratte desu ka, which translates roughly to wouldn't it be crazy sad if all these kids died, whose attempt to thrust its imperiled children and obvious tragedy down my throat was cut off by me going, actually, I watched Black Bullet back in 2014, so I think I'm good. It came as no big surprise then when, one season later, that same dumb friend walked up and said I should watch this hot new show about bondage fetishist 12-year-olds in perilous situations because it was very good. So I did what any good friend would do. I generously pointed out the structure of that sentence was rather suspect and could get him in a lot of trouble if he said it in the wrong company, and then I called the police and had him arrested. I'll be the first to say I'm a bit of a petty sort, so when a friend moon walks up and says that they really like any given thing, I take that more as a challenge than a recommendation. So I went into episode 1 trying to find all the things I could criticize to prove that I was very smart and clever, because my self-perception as a critic is basically all I have. It was very striking then that about 5 minutes into the first episode I was feeling that same feeling I got when I watched Kekai Sensen for the first time, that little buzz of, oh, this might actually be really special. Hey, I'm Aaox. Do you like seeing children experiencing immeasurable suffering and pain whilst confronting the grim spectre of the inevitability of death at every turn? Of course you do. You know who else does? Kinoma Citrus, as showcased with the aforementioned Black Bullet and their latest kiddie cruncher, Made in Abyss. What a horrible bit this is. Made in Abyss takes place in and around a great big hole in the ground, the titular abyss, and explores the idea that people will do anything if it's appropriately dangerous. A whole economy is built up around the abyss and its exploration, and a cast of explorers called Cave Raiders frequently head into the hole to explore the space, get silly, and just have some fun with it, you know? Precluding the get-rich-quick schemes, it turns out that the abyss is actually a horribly dangerous place, being a giant vertical shaft at least as deep as 45 Empire State Buildings stacked on top of one another, because it can't ever be easy, can it? To compound the danger, it's permeated with something called the Curse of the Abyss that causes severe complications to one's health if one attempts to ascend, with the effects becoming more pronounced the deeper one goes. It's also full of terrifyingly dangerous monsters that can basically see the future. Only complete idiots would think about going down. Oh hey Rico, didn't see you there. Rico's a young cave raider who receives a letter from her mother from the bottom of the abyss, and everyone is very shocked, which seems a bit strange until one learns that no one's ever gotten to the end of the abyss and her mother was supposed to have died years ago, in a page taken right out of James Sunderland's diary. The letter carries with it a note that simply says, "I'm waiting at the bottom of the abyss," and so naturally, Rico, a 12-year-old, heads off on a suicide mission, one that would surely fail if she hadn't recently found the frustrated sigh, amnesiac, excited murmuring, robot, quote, from Reg. From Cave Story. Armed with her robot boy, Rico and Reg set off on their one-way trip, and thus we have the thrust of the matter. She'll be fine though, because she's got a magical compass that points to the bottom of the abyss. I mean, it's not... Why do they need a compass that points in the direction of the abyss? You think you could just point at the giant hole? I mean... Well, at least I have it, that's something. Oh, for God's sake! There's an eminent air of mystery and strangeness to the proceedings that's extraordinarily disquieting. Despite evidence to the contrary, Rico completely believes her mother must be alive and immediately sets out on the suicide trip into a literal hellhole, running away from her friends, her home, and any hope of living a life that doesn't involve dying in a big pit. It feels almost like the abyss has made everyone go insane already. People are drawn to it, Rico especially, and they willingly and happily throw their lives away just for the sake of seeing what's down there, even knowing that at a certain point you just literally cannot come back. It's a realistic enough emotion, certainly, doing something stupid because it's there. People climb Everest, vacation in Cambodia, and browse the NTR tag for reasons not dissimilar to these, but for this 12-year-old to be embarking on a suicide mission and to have a bunch of adults just roll their eyes and go, "Oh, that Rico, what can you do?" despite it being a 12-year-old basically marching to her word death is absolutely jarring, which I'm pretty sure is exactly the point. This is a world wherein children find skeletons on a daily basis and eat monsters that eat humans without batting an eye, because that's just how their world is. Meaning amnesiac stranger Reg gets to act as our convenient viewer insert straight man who grounds our perception of the world so we can remain aware that this whole situation has transcended just being disquieting and entered full-on macabre. It's not weird that Reg finds a skeleton to be a frightening, disconcerting discovery. It's weird that Rico doesn't. She's 12. The added irony of the robot acting the most like a human in the entire story gives it a little extra edge too, especially when we reach some of the more monstrous inhabitants like Fashion Queen Ozen or the absolutely just straight up obvious Nazi Germany analog effectively 100% Joseph Mengele wearing armor from Destiny, whose name is Bondrude. The normal people acting normally in abnormal situations shtick is always really striking and almost frightening in an interesting way. I think a lot of Kimono Friends' intrigue and appeal hangs on this as well, of having people who shouldn't be where they are, treating a strange, bizarre world like it's completely normal. Gives you that little sense of, hold on, hang on a second, where's this rondo going? And it's a very effective setup for a show that'll grab a hold of you and not let go until it's squeezed you to near death. Seriously, it's been like a month since I watched the most visceral episode, and I cannot unclench. The through lines for each series of episodes are depicted in sort of bebop-esque vignettes that detail Rico and Reg's adventures in each of the layers, culminating in the descent to the 5th, which puts us at about 3 episodes per layer. Whilst meandering around trying to think of things to say about the show that would make me feel smart, I ended up choosing the word mechanical in reference to the show's pretty straightforward plot progression. As the gruesome twosome descend further into the abyss, they meet a person or group of people, learn to like them a lot, and then say a tearful goodbye to them as they go deeper down into the progressively less pleasant, more dangerous layers, going further and further away not only from civilization but also all of their friends. There are a lot of illusions present in the narrative. As I said before, there's some pretty obvious Auschwitz imagery on there with Bondrude and his train full of children to experiment on, but there's also the idea of being trapped in your body, euthanasia, and terminal sickness with the character of Mitty, addiction in the ways people just can't leave the abyss alone, and of course the regular old inevitability of death with the abyss itself. This isn't a show that dabbles in light themes. I can't say this is a show that handles all of the myriad plates it's spinning flawlessly. Sometimes the hard shifts to high drama or comedic levity can feel a bit too jarring, but it never really felt like it was bending over backwards to force those themes on me, nor did it feel like it was utilizing them for shock value, which is impressive when you're doing a Joseph Mengele impression with one hand and throwing a dead child into the air with the other. Pulling that off with dramatic consistency whilst avoiding feeling gratuitous is something absolutely worth commending. Made in China is an eminently gripping piece of media then, but the first of the clammy, grasping digits to wrap around your shivering, terrified form is almost certainly going to be how utterly beautiful this show looks, which came as a distinct surprise to me. An anime about kids going on a big adventure into a cave was something that conjured images of dark, dim corridors bored into rock, which there certainly is some of, but the grand majority of Abyss's runtime looks like it's taking place in a national park rather than the anus of the earth, which is especially odd considering there's a lot of analogues to old Dante's Infernum. Comparisons to Studio Ghibli were frequent while I was watching the show, so it should be no surprise that the arts director is none other than Osamu Masuyama, notable for being behind the background art of Spirited Away, Howl's Moving Castle, Ponyo, and more recently, the phenomenal Your Name, and the artistry shows. There's a lot of words I could use to describe the watercolor, painterly, soft, varied, and vivid work on display here, but since those are at a premium, I'll just call it breathtaking. The second thing that hits you, at least it hit me second, is the sound design. Kevin Penkin puts on an absolute clinic over here as far as the OST is concerned, with the ethereal filmic score lending itself perfectly to the goings-on inside that dang old hole in the ground. Riko's extremely excited to go on this adventure, but she also doesn't expect to come back from it, and the music manages to capture these two polemic feelings so marvelously. The track Remembering Home especially, whilst not being as profound a hitter as the majestic Hanazeve Karadina, clearly emulates a funeral dirge, and it manages to convey that sense of wistful wistful longing in the drawn-out violin with the knowledge you can't go back again in the mournful piano, and it just works so extremely well. The levity of the lighter moments and the gravity of the darker ones twist around each other through the score, and it's a sublime set of work. Perhaps even more impressive than the stellar music, though, is how amazing the sound effects are. It feels like nearly everything today draws from the same pool of 15 or so sound effects, so when Rico dipped a spoon into a bowl, and it sounded like someone had to dip a spoon into a bowl in real life right next to my head. It was actually so realistic it was jarring, like if a real, actual, live-action human had just walked onto the screen. As I said before, there are parts of this show that I just went into full-on shock from, because this is not a show about kids that wears kids' gloves. Brutal, nasty things happen down in that hole, and Abyss doesn't flinch from showing it, even if you yourself do. There's a certain point later on that was so completely horrifying that I felt like I was choking watching it, and the conversation with the friends I was watching it with devolved into sharp inhalations of breaths and various strained noises like turn it off, can't watch it! Again, it doesn't pull its punches, but the grotesqueries on display here are presented much like the fan service, if you can call it that. It's just a fact of life down there. It's never presented with fanfare or a dramatic camera zoom in. That said, it would be remiss of me not to advise you to proceed with caution. The melancholy, traumatizing artistry Abyss presents can be absolutely captivating, and it's a testament to the skill inherent of the staff at Kinema Citrus that they managed to swing this one so impressively, even if it ends on a cliffhanger that, whilst suitably climactic, does demand a second season. It's not that often that a show devoid of a conclusion ends so conclusively, and this is without question one of the strongest finales I've seen in the medium. It could probably beat up my dad. So yeah, watch Made in Abyss. It's definitely not for everyone, those with weak constitutions especially, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from it, and as far as impact goes, Made in Abyss made a bigger one than anything I've seen recently. So it turns out that Made in Abyss was actually pretty special, after all.